Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren and I am an American woman living and working in Osaka, Japan. 2 years were for graduate school, 2 years I've been working now. I basically came back to YouTube after 3 years and I decided to do a question and answer video this time. So I asked you guys in my last video what you guys would like to know, either regarding living in Japan, what I've been up to the past few years. So unanimously, everybody asked about the Japanese interview process. That doesn't have to do with getting an English teaching job here in Japan. But before I get started on that, I wanted to answer one question that would kind of give a little bit of a background about me. And that question comes from Little Dreamer, and she says, is your current or were your past jobs related to your major? What did you study? I have to choose my uni and major next year, so I would love to hear about your experience. I went to Elon University in North Carolina in America, and I studied International Business and Finance were my two majors, and I got a Bachelor of Science of Business Administration in those two majors. So within International Business, I came and studied abroad here in Japan. I had two minors as well, which were International Studies and Asian Studies, and within Asian Studies is where I studied Japanese. After that, I graduated in 2012 with that degree, and I went straight to Kyoto, Japan to Doshisha University, where I studied MBA, my MBA, which is a Master of Business Administration. So my first job out of university, out of my graduate school program, was in manufacturing. It was a manufacturing control position, and yes, I feel like my business training really did help me for it, and also that specifically international business, because I focused more specifically on Japan, and that's when I studied abroad at Kansai Gaida University. I studied some international business there. I've always had an interest in how Japan works business-wise, but once again, it's totally different when you actually enter a company than when you actually study it in a book. But having that foundation of international business and kind of having a bit of an understanding of how the Japanese business mindset, or how Japanese businesses work, a base of that really did help in my first job. My second job now is a writer and an editor for the website called Izanao. That does not directly have anything to do with my business degree, but once again, having that critical thinking background and having that business background really does help knowing how to control, organize everything. Now moving on to the interview process. From Katrina Watanabe, she says, welcome back. What was your experience with job interviews, especially at a Japanese company without many foreigners? I want to start working in Japan next year. I had a seminar about the Japanese way of job hunting for Japanese university and so on, but how did you do it? There's a second question about experience as a foreigner and a woman working in a Japanese company, but I think that will be a different video, especially the woman parts. First off is your experience at job interviews with a Japanese company without many foreigners. How I ended up getting my first job was through my university, through my MBA program, basically. And first was I got an internship at a hotel. I thought that internship was going to lead to a job, and that didn't end up happening. I was pretty naive, and I thought that they would automatically like me, and I set my sights exactly onto that job, and I didn't end up getting it in the end. But that is one way of doing it, is getting an internship and then using that to get a job later on if they like you. I didn't end up getting the job at the hotel in the end, so I had to figure out another way. And the Career Center at your university will be so helpful. For me, I got into a Japanese university, so that was Doshisha, that was for my MBA program. That was my foot in the door to Japan. If you have a Japanese university name on your resume, that really does help. Especially for me, Doshisha was a huge name in the Kansai area. So being able to have that name on your degree is really important. In Japan, they really value a university's name because they have an alumni base. They have a lot of history. Japan basically values a lot of history. There was a career advisor just for the global MBA program. He was Japanese, and I went and I sat down with him, and he helped me get a Japanese resume. I gave him my English resume, and he helped me make it into a Japanese resume, which I still have, and I update in Japanese as we go, or as I go along in my career. That's how I got my second job, was I updated my Japanese resume and my English resume both. Through him, he said, oh, I know of a company who is looking for a American person to enter into their company. Would you like to have an interview with them? And I said, of course, yeah. And at that point, I was not picky about the type of job that I was going to get right at that moment. I just wanted to stay in Japan. And that is also another thing, is when you first start out, you can't be picky with the type of job that you get. If you don't want to teach English, you have to have a base. You have to start somewhere. And for me, it was a manufacturing company. Also, around that same time, one of my friends who lived in Tokyo at the time introduced me to a placement agency in Tokyo. And I went there when I visited her during the time where I graduated and I didn't have a job yet. I went to Tokyo and I visited her, and at the same time I went to this placement agency. And from then, I got 2 job interviews, one in Kobe and one in Nagoya. And those were definitely different experiences than the job that I actually got. So basically, I registered with this placement agency and I told them like where I wanted to work, what kind of the conditions I wanted to work with, and I ended up getting a job interview in Nagoya and in Kobe. And one of the biggest things that I found out, even with the job that I actually got, is they make you take an aptitude test. This is across the board in Japan. They make you take an aptitude test, and that is in Japanese. There is no English version of this aptitude test. It is only in Japanese. And that is going to be one of my biggest things that I will say here. You need to speak Japanese. You need at least JLPT N2, I would say. At that time, I was N3. I was kind of on the edge of N2. Well, I don't think I was on the edge of it. I was definitely N3. I had the N3 on the JLPT, and I still haven't taken the N2. But I will say it is best to shoot for N2 Japanese, because a company will actually look at you more if you have N2 on your resume. Okay, so what is the actual interview itself like? Of course, it's different from company to company, and the company that I ultimately ended up going with through my university, it was a very casual interview. I only had one interview, and then they offered me the job, because I guess I was what they were looking for, or they didn't know what they were looking for. I'm not sure, but I had one interview and they offered me the job in the end. For the placement agencies, I didn't end up getting those jobs for whatever reason, but the interview process was pretty much the same, where it was a panel interview. I had the aptitude test, and then I went in for a panel interview, whether it be 2 to 4 people, basically. And it was all in Japanese. They asked me questions in Japanese, and they don't ask you anything really about your experience, to be honest. In Japan, they more focus on your personality and your potential, because when you enter in a Japanese company, they basically train you from the ground up. At least big companies do. The company that I ended up going for was actually a small company, and I didn't really get much training, which is one of the reasons why I decided to leave the company in the end, because I wanted to get more experience in a different area. I will say that being thrust headfirst into the company, into working, is what really raised my Japanese level, which is one of the other questions there. I basically, in about a year, went from an N3 level to an N2 level. N2 as in spoken. There's a different, there's a pretty big gap between N3 and N2, and that has to do with business Japanese. I learned so many phrases, so many business terms, how to answer the phone, everything at my first company, and that was a lot of training. It was a lot for me to go through. And when you actually enter a company, you're going to have to be aware of all of those little business things that you don't think of before. You think, oh, I'm the foreigner, I'm not going to have to do that. Nope. You are treated as exactly like a Japanese person in that sense, where they're like, you answer the phones, you have to call the customer. They're not going to baby you. In my company, they didn't baby me whatsoever. I was not considered a new hire. I had an MBA degree. Even though it was my first year, my first job out of school, I still was considered like an adult, somebody who has experience. If you were to ask me what I would recommend for you guys to do for the interview process in Japan, actually the easiest way is actually to go to the career forums, which happen all around the world. There's one in Tokyo, there's one in Osaka, there's one in Boston, London, and I think one other place. And those places are actually places where you can meet with the companies one-on-one. You can get interviews right there. And I went to the Osaka and I went to the Tokyo one. I didn't end up getting jobs out of those two, but they actually got me exposed to more of the interview process. I had interviews at the Tokyo forum, and that was very, very scary for me. I didn't think my Japanese was very good at that time. I was trying, and I was really, really scared because I didn't want to be judged on my Japanese ability. So my advice to you guys is just jump headfirst into it. Don't really care about your Japanese abilities. Just go straight in and answer the questions as best as you can in Japanese. They understand you're foreign. They're going to hire you because you're foreign. And they're not expecting you to have perfect Japanese, but they are expecting you to kind of follow Japanese business customs. I guess if you're in Japan, they're going to be expecting you to follow the Japanese business customs. They're not going to be babying you in that sense. And that's the only thing that I will warn you about, is kind of getting used to Japanese business customs. Getting used to the Japanese way of interviewing can be quite intimidating, but they're not expecting you to be Japanese though. So they're not expecting you to go like out years and years before you actually get the job and get an interview, or years and years before you start working to interview to get jobs. But I will recommend interview practice, actually going and talking to companies that you're interested in at these career forums, whether it be like a few years ahead of time. And I wish that I had the confidence back then to say that. Somehow I ended up being okay with the path that I chose, but you have to be driven. It doesn't mean that you can't be scared, but just push back, like push against being scared and just push through it, is my only advice that I can say. Because job hunting in another country is really, really scary. I was scared 2 years ago. Around this time is when I graduated, about 2 years ago, and I was scared. I didn't know what to do, but I just dove headfirst into it. I wanted to work here, and in the end, it worked out. I think that that is it for today's video. If you have any other questions that you would like to ask me, please comment in the comment box below and I will get around to it. If you have any video ideas, any content suggestions, also please comment down below. And as always, if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up and remember to subscribe. And also follow me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that jazz. And my blog too, in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you guys next time. Bye!